On Saturday, March 28, 2026, the Key Corner chapter NSDAR, along with the VFW Auxiliary, honored Vietnam veterans in recognition of National Vietnam War Veterans Day. Held at McIver's Grant Public Library, the morning brought veterans and their families together for fellowship, reflection, and gratitude. This video captures special moments from the event, including proclamations presented by the mayors of Dyersburg and Dyer County, recognizing the service and sacrifice of Vietnam veterans. Guest speaker Dr. Joe Wolf, a U.S. Navy doctor who served with the 3rd Medical Battalion at Khe Sanh, shared powerful stories from his time during the war. During the siege, Dr. Wolf and his team triaged approximately 2,500 troops. He later received the Bronze Star Medal with Combat V for his service. It was a meaningful time of remembrance and appreciation for those who served.
I am Patsy Peckinpah. I am the regent with the Key Corner chapter of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. We are one of the hosts of today's event, along with the local VFW, Veterans Reform Wars, newly formed auxiliary. I think there are a few people here.
And our president is here.
Yes. We appreciate y'all partnering with us in this recognition. As I said, this is a recognition that's long overdue. The Vietnam War veterans, anybody who served between 1955 and 1975, I don't think we have said thank you enough to you, because what you did was not easy. What you did was very difficult. And I think the older we get, the more we understand how difficult it was. But we do so appreciate your service, your sacrifice, and we thank you so much for it.
Today we're honored to have Mayor David Quick, who is the mayor of Dyer County, and Mayor John Holden, mayor of Dyersburg, with us. They're going to present proclamations from the county and from Dyersburg. So we'll turn the program right now over to Mayor Quick and let him proceed with his proclamation, and then John, you can follow him if you don't mind.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend y'all for putting this together in celebration for all the veterans coming back from the Vietnam War. I'd like to, back up what Miss Patsy said. I mean, just great things. I want to thank the DAR and the VFW chapter, and thank y'all for allowing me to be here today. I'm honored to be here, and I'm always honored to support my veterans. And at this time, the county has put together a proclamation for National Veterans War Veterans Day on March 29th, 2026, whereas the Vietnam War, which began as a second Indochina War, was a 20-year military conflict that took place in the Southeast Asia country of Vietnam that started in 1955 as a war between communist North Vietnam and non-communist South Vietnam. And whereas the United States of America became involved in 1962 in an advisory capacity supporting South Vietnam, as the U.S. government feared the defeat of South Vietnam would lead the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia. And whereas 3 years later, U.S. troops were deployed to officially support the South Vietnamese effort. By 1969, 543,000 U.S. service members were in the country, the highest number of American soldiers during the war. And whereas on January 27, 1973, the signing of the Paris Peace Accords brought an end to the war, the withdrawal of American troops commenced, as did the release of American prisoners held in North Vietnam. 2 months later, on March the 29th, the last service members left the region. And whereas all told, More than 9 million Americans served during the Vietnam War era, including more than 2.7 million in Southeast Asia. American losses were significant. 58,260 U.S. service members lost their lives, including 1,000, and this is a high number if you look at that, 1,295 Tennesseans. And whereas upon returning home from the war, many service members were not welcomed back as honorable patriots who dutifully answered our nation's call for military service, many were criticized for their involvement in a war which was popular with many of their fellow Americans here at home, was not popular with many of the Americans here at home. And whereas many states, including Tennessee, have observed March 29th, the date of the last service member pullout from South Vietnam, as National Veteran War Veterans Day in honor of the men and women who served in the United States military during the Vietnam War era. In 2017, Congress recognized the date as an official day of remembrance. Now, therefore, I, David Quick, Dyer County Mayor, do hereby proclaim March 29, 2026 as National Vietnam War Veterans Day throughout Dyer County in honor of all citizens of Dyer County who served our country during the Vietnam War. Thank you for your service and welcome home. I don't know what kind of timeline we're on, but could I tell a little story?
Sure.
Well, Mr. Robert Pires, I don't know if y'all know Mr. Robert Pires Sr. was in the Vietnam War. He was one of the most decorated people in the Vietnam War. He was right here from Dyer County. They brought him home, and when the plane landed in Texas, he thought he was coming home to people that loved him and appreciated him for serving his country and doing his duty. And he was bombarded by people throwing fruit at him and treating him horrible. And I knew him later in life, and he lived, I own his farm now, and he lived on Pierce Road, and an outgoing person. I researched about him, a wonderful person that loved his community and loved the people in the community and served, in the church. And many, after that happened and he was repeatedly treated like that, he went into a shell and he rarely ever came out of his house. I helped take care of his farm with my construction company, is how I knew him. And in his later days, he offered to sell me that farm, but he still was so reclusive over the way he had been treated that later he electrocuted himself in his house, and they didn't find him till a year later. Such a sad story for such a person that was decorated so highly in the Vietnam War. So I just thought I'd share that with you as well. A horrible thing for someone that did so much for his community and his country. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm assuming we have some Vietnam veterans here, right? Would you stand up, let us recognize you? Thank you. We appreciate your service, and there's other veterans here of other wars. We appreciate you as well. So on behalf of the city of Dyersburg, let me thank Beverly and Patsy and the Key Corner chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution for organizing this event and recognizing Vietnam veterans that serve our country. I appreciate all that y'all do to keep that spirit alive and recognize and honor people. So on behalf of the city of Dyersburg, it's an honor for me to read this proclamation, whereas on March 28, 2017, President Donald Trump signed the Vietnam War Veterans Recognition Act of 2017, which officially recognizes March 29 as National Vietnam War Veterans Day. And whereas we pay tribute to the more than 3 million servicemen and women who left their families to serve bravely in support of one of the longest conflicts in which our country has ever been involved in a world away from everything they knew and everyone they loved. Whereas this proclamation serves as an opportunity to thank and honor veterans of the Vietnam War, including personnel who were held as prisoners of war or listed as missing in action, for their service and sacrifice on behalf of the United States, and to thank and honor the families of these veterans. And whereas we shift our thoughts and prayers to the memories and to the families of over 58,000 who never made it home, and pay tribute to the 1,295 Tennesseans that lost their lives fighting for our country in Vietnam. And whereas no words will ever be fully worthy for their service, nor any honor truly befitting their sacrifice, let us remember that it is never too late to pay tribute to the men and women who answered that call of duty with courage and valor. And whereas National Vietnam War Veterans Day presents the opportunity for the citizens of Dyersburg to honor and thank our Vietnam veterans for their sacrifice to our country. And whereas we see Vietnam veterans in our daily lives, in rural communities, and in the hearts of our cities, today let us seek them out to express our deepest gratitude for what they surrendered for our freedom. And now, therefore, I, John Holden, Mayor of the City of Dyersburg, along with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, do hereby proclaim March 29, 2026 as National Vietnam War Veterans Day in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and encourage all citizens to join me in this worthy observance. Signed this day, 28th of March, 2026. Thank you, and God bless you, and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Quick and Mayor Holden. We really do appreciate your presence this morning and the proclamations that you have issued, so thank you very much. We also have proclamations from the City of New Bern and the City of Trimble. Their mayors or officials were not able to be with us today, and I'm not going to read both of those proclamations, but of course they are expressing their gratitude and thankfulness for each of you for your service, and we just want to continue to recognize you and show our appreciation for what you have done for the United States. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it over now to Penny Switzer.
Our state theme is honoring our patriots' perseverance. As daughters of the American Revolution, we continually honor our ancestors who persevered against all odds to establish this country. In addition, we honor all those who have followed, preserving the freedoms that we hold dear, as they have served in the military. As a teenager, I may get choked up, I wore this bracelet from Major Robert Peel from Paris, who was a POW from 1965 to 1973. I prayed every night for his perseverance and his safety, and for all of you, unbeknownst to me at the time, but I was praying for your safety as well, and your perseverance. Today we are honored to have Dr. Joe Wolf, who will share his thoughts and his response on behalf of all those who serve. Dr. Wolf was with the 3rd Marine Division and the 3rd Medical Battalion in Vietnam. And so I'm going to turn the podium over to him. So thank you all.
I was gonna say, if y'all decide to throw anything, rather than tomatoes, I prefer donuts. Thank you to the ladies of the DAR and the ladies of the VFW Auxiliary, and to Mayor Holden, Mayor Quick. Appreciate the opportunity. And this is not gonna be anything formal. This is gonna be sort of memories of, I guess the best title is How I Got There in the First Place. And that sort of is a joke in the first place too. And feel free, if you want more coffee or more donuts, you can feel free to get up and walk around and get them if you want to. I grew up in East Tennessee. I was sort of a redneck hillbilly in the Appalachian Mountains, Rutledge, Tennessee. And grew up part of that time on a farm. And we, as a kid, played a lot of cowboys and Indians. And then as the Korean War broke out, we sort of got into playing army, you know, and jumping off railroad embankments on top of each other and off lumber piles on top of each other and stuff like that. And reading a lot of books and going to all the war movies that I could possibly see, I decided that I wanted to be in the military. And the first thing I wanted to do was be a pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And then I ended up having to get glasses, actually get my driver's license. That blew the pilot deal. And my batting average did go up about 15 points. I could see the ball. But beyond that, into the fighter pilot deal. And so then, in reading some more books, I happened to come upon Leon Uris, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with him. Probably his most popular book was Exodus. He was the author of Exodus. He also wrote a bunch of stuff about the military. He was a Marine, I think, with 2-6 in the South Pacific during World War II, and wrote several books about their experiences there on Tarawa and I think Iwo Jima, but he was primarily on Tarawa and Kesselwan. And he wrote a book called Battle Cry that was made into a movie. And I was really enthusiastic, saw those movies and stuff, and decided I wanted to be a Marine. Okay. Right. That questions my sanity. But anyway, I had pretty good grades in high school, and so I ended up with Estes Kefauver's appointment to Annapolis when I graduated from high school. But in the course of that and trying to get into Annapolis and enrolling at UT Memphis because I was a big football fan, turned out that I flunked the physical to go to Annapolis because of my eyes. At that point in time, you had to have 20/20 vision uncorrected in Annapolis. And it was the only military academy that required that. But that's where I wanted to go because I wanted to be in the Marines. So I applied for a waiver, took another physical, flunked it also because my eyes hadn't gotten any better. And at that point, just sort of gave up on the military. I was at UT for 3 years, about 3.5 years actually in Knoxville. And we had Air Force ROTC mandatory for the first 2 years, but I really didn't want to be in the Air Force. And so at the end of 2 years, I gave up on it and just sort of scrapped the military and decided I wanted to go to med school. I was switched from engineering to pre-med and ended up in Memphis in med school, thinking only about medicine and practice and had no idea about military. So finished med school in December of '65, did an internship at Methodist Hospital and finished that in December '66, and then did a year of general surgery preparatory to going into a subspecialty, preferably urology. Those were my plans. Come on in.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
Oh, wait a minute, I lost him. I lost my Vietnam vet. Give me a moment to get collected.
So anyway, we, during this course of time, as an intern, rotating intern, and then as a rotating general surgery resident, you got exposed to all the subspecialties in general medicine and also in general surgery. And in particular, in general surgery, you got exposed to things like neuro and orthopedics and plastic and thoracic and anesthesia and other things like this. And I think we spent probably 2 to 3 months in each of these subspecialties, just working with the docs who were on the staff and trying to learn some techniques. And we had some pretty good instructors. Memphis had some good docs at that point in time. And in particular, the instruction I got in anesthesia, I had 3 months training in anesthesia. And this actually got me into trouble. During the latter part of my general surgery residency, I think it was about August of '67, I was sitting around in the interns' quarters shooting the bull, talking to some other guys, and several docs had come back from Vietnam and were doing their year of general surgery before going into a subspecialty, or were already in their subspecialty doing training, and they'd been to Vietnam, they were back, and they all said, oh, you ought to go ahead and go and get it over with. There's nothing going on over there. It's really quiet, no problems at all, and you'll enjoy it. And you can walk up and down the beach at Da Nang and stuff like that. So it didn't sound too bad, and I thought, well, I won't do that. And so a little bit earlier than this, one of my roommates, who was from Lake County, Bob Donald, had been my roommate in med school, and he was doing some research, getting ready to decide where he wanted to go for an internship, and I was in my internship. And he called me and said, Wolf said, we need to join the Navy. I said, well, I joined the Navy. And he said, well, number one, as soon as we finish your internship, we're going to get drafted. And he said, if you get drafted, you're going to the Army, and you're going to be over there in the rice paddies in the jungle, and you don't want to do that. Don't you want to be on a nice ship out in the ocean, the cool breeze, and clean uniforms, and nurses in white uniforms around you, so that you can see the nurses, this kind of thing. Didn't sound too bad, So I ended up, along with Bob, joining the Navy. And they had a program called Ensign 1915 program where you could sign up. They backdated your commission to the day you started med school, so that your date of rank was that date, and it gradually progressed so that when you finished your internship, you had a rank of Navy lieutenant or Marine captain. And so with that rank, as I say, I was sitting around in the residence quarters and talking to these guys about going to Vietnam. And I finally said, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I called a recruiter and asked him to pull my records, and I gave him my serial number, that kind of thing. And I said, look, I want to go ahead and go to Vietnam, and I want to go with the Marines. There was dead silence on the other end of the phone. I thought he'd hung up on me. I really did. And after about 30 or 40 seconds, I said, are you there? And he said, yeah, Doc, and we can fix you up. 2 weeks later, I had orders. Fleet Marine Force, Vietnam, 3rd Marine Division. So, finished my internship and residency at Methodist. I think I finished the residency in December of '67. I was in my sister and brother-in-law's wedding a week before I finished, and she swears that I was best man at the wedding. I don't remember it, so apparently I enjoyed the wedding. Went back to Memphis and was in, my roommate at that point in time, Dr. Bill Campbell, who was later up at Paris, Tennessee. He was extern when I was an intern. He was an intern when I was a general surgery resident. And I was best man in their wedding on the night of the 6th of January in '68. And I had finished my year of general surgery. Best man at their wedding, that was on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, I got up, went to the airport, got on a plane, and flew to LA. Got off the plane, got on a bus, and went down to Camp Pendleton and signed in to the Marines. My first day of active duty was as a Marine at Camp Pendleton. And we were sort of in a specialized basic training kind of thing, that they didn't try to kill us as much as they did the grunt Marines, but they still made us get out and go on runs and practice with an M14. I saw an M16 one time, never got to touch it, but we went on drills with the M14, things like that. And we were supposed to be there for 6 weeks, learning about booby traps and injuries and how to take care of them. Well, I'd been there 3 weeks and found myself at Travis Air Force Base, getting on a plane and heading for Okinawa. They pulled us out early, our whole class at Field Med School. And I was in Okinawa by, I think, the 1st of February, and I was in the country, I think, by the 3rd of February, 1968. We had no idea why they pulled us out, why we were over there, what was going on. And somebody said something about TET starting. It's TET. We had no idea about TET. Nobody knew what was going on. So we found out a little bit more about it there. The first flight into the country got scrapped because they were taking rockets at the runway at Da Nang. And so then we got other flights in and had to report in to the division surgeon, 3rd Marine Division. So I'm walking down the halls, finally saw the sign on the board that said Captain George Wire, Division Surgeon. It turned out he was a friend of the guy who was going to be my head of urology when I came back to Memphis. Al Biggs was head of the department, and he had asked me, said, I've got a friend who's a Navy doctor, and I think he's in Vietnam. He said, if you run into him, I wish you'd tell him I said hello. He said, his name is George Wire. Well, I said, sure, be glad to, figuring, fat chance of me finding him. Well, going down the hall, looking at the names, I finally saw Division Surgeon Captain George Wire. So it turned out it was Al Biggs' friend. I went in, checked in, talked to him, and he wanted to know what my experience had been in general surgery. And so I went through all these different subspecialties, and when I mentioned anesthesia, I found myself 2 days later at Fubai with the 3rd Medical Battalion Hospital, AMED, as an anesthesiologist. Now, I've had 3 months training, but I'm in the regular rotation with the other anesthesiologists and nurse anesthetists, and we're getting the casualties out of Way. 1st Marines were in battle Way, and we were the closest hospital. We were about 9 miles, I think, from Way, and so we were getting those casualties, and we'd have 120 to 140 patients on stretchers in the hall of the hospital all the time. We had 4 ORs in the hospital and 2 out behind the hospital. We called them MUST units, and they were for minor surgery. So we'd have one guy responsible for the MUST units, and everybody else was working the main ORs. And we were going from, I'd say daylight to dark, but it was when the first chopper came in until we got everybody cleared out of the halls. And on, I think the 7th day I was in the country, I think this was the 11th of February, was my day to run the MUST units. And I was out there, had patients in each operating room. They both had shrapnel wounds in their legs and needed to have the breathe on. And so I had done a spinal on each one of them, had good 4-quadrant drips, neither spinal took. What we found out was that liquid Ponticane is destroyed by heat. And we were all using Ponticane kits that were shipped from the States. They were sent over in Conex boxes, these big metal containers like you see all around. And they were packed full of these, plus other equipment. And they sat on the docks in Da Nang for about a week or 10 days in the heat. And were shipped to us. And so the Ponticane in these kits was cooked in about 50% of the kits. ineffective. My spinals didn't take. And so I mixed up some powdered pomacaine, which I was taught to do by the guys in Memphis. I respinaled one of the patients and was getting ready to respinal the other patient. And general surgeon said, you better go ahead and induce him because we're gonna have to open his belly. So I went ahead and put him to sleep and intubated him, and we're churning away on the anesthesia machine. And my CO comes out and wants to know how things are going and what I'm doing. Well, now he's a full bird colonel or commander, Navy commander. He's board certified in OB-GYN and also board certified in anesthesiology. And I told him what was going on and why I'd had to respinal these patients and why I'd had to put one to sleep. He said, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you can't run 2 rooms at the same time. I said, well, I got to. And he said, you can't do it. What are you gonna do if that guy over there in that room gets in trouble and you're running this one? So I'm gonna flip the machine on automatic and I'm gonna go over and take over, see what the problem is, straighten it out, and then I'm gonna come back and flip it off automatic and continue with the case. He said, well, you just can't do that. And I said, we got 120 patients on the stretcher out in the hall. We gotta take care of them. And I am doing it. And he said, you can't. And I said, I am. And he stomped out of the room. Next morning, our XO, second in command, showed up. I was getting ready to go take my shift in anesthesia in the main hospital. And he handed me my orders, case on, anesthesiologist. So I was supposed to be the anesthesiologist at the case on combat base. What they were doing, as I found out when I got there, is they were replacing all the board certified docs at Caisson with GMOs. And I was the last GMO to go up there and replace a board man who was the anesthesiologist there at that time. We were basically cannon fodder. We were expendable because they didn't want their board certified guys killed. And so I got on a plane that afternoon, 2:30 that afternoon, C-130. My CO was on the plane to be sure I got there, I guess. The XO had carried my bag to the plane and put it on there. They were going to be sure that I did get there. So I sat down beside the CO because really no more seats back there because there were a bunch of Marines and some Army guys. And there was an ambulance there and a bunch of mail bags behind it, right on the tailgate of the plane. And CO says, now look, he said, when we get up there, the plane's gonna land and it's gonna taxi. It's gonna turn. And I want you to get back there and help the Marines throw off those mail bags. And then get out of the way because they're gonna drive the ambulance off and then jump off because the plane's gonna be picking up speed. It's not gonna stop. And so you're gonna have to jump off because it's gonna take off again. So, okay. First time I've ever had to do that. I've been in the country 10 days now. So, got back there and helped them throw off the mail bags, and then I heard the ambulance fire up, stepped out of the way. Ambulance comes off the back ramp. And I looked around, there's nobody else back in the hold, cargo hold of the 130. And the plane started to pick up speed. So I jumped off. Plane turns and takes off, and I'm looking the runway right in front of me. There's a shell crater about this big around in the matting. It's steel matting, and this probably was a large mortar round that had punched a hole in it. So I looked over to my left, and there's burning helicopters in revetments. I looked over to my right, and it's just a blast wall of sandbags. Didn't see anybody. And that's probably the loneliest I've ever felt in my life. But then somebody stuck their head up, and I think it was my CO from behind the blast wall and said, over here, and a couple of other were coming. And so I went over there, and that was my introduction to Caisson. I was up there for 2.5 months. I think they pulled us out, I believe it was about the 23rd of April. When First Marines came in and pulled us out. And they came in by helicopter, and we went out by helicopter because Route 9 coming into the base was still closed by NVA incoming. While I was up there on the base, we averaged about 1,700 rounds of incoming coming into the base every day. And just as a routine, sometimes it go up as high as 2,500 to 3,000 rounds. And on days when there was heavy bombing of North Vietnam, it dropped down to about 500 to 1,000, but on the average about 1,700 rounds a day. Quezon was about, location-wise, we were about 4 miles from the Laotian border and about 7 miles from Korak Mountain, where they had some 152 artillery dug in that we got the benefit of pretty much every day. We were 11 miles south of the DMZ, I think actually 17 miles south of the border between South Vietnam and North Vietnam. And there was a special forces camp right on the Laotian border that got overrun right before I got up to Quezon. And they were overrun by the NVA with tanks and stuff. We never did get hit by tanks, but had a lot of incoming. While I was there, we triaged a little over 2,500 patients and medevaced almost 2,300 of them. And we had roughly 350 killed in that period of time that we had to send out. And that was one of my jobs, was to have to go to graves and pronounce the patients and stuff like that. So that was basically what we did. It was different, a lot different, but it taught you to think on your feet. When we first got to Quezon, we were still in tents. Our medical facility, we had glass walls around the outside of the tents that were up about this high. But we'd have the patients in on A-frame stretcher rests. And when we start getting incoming, we'd have to take them down and put them down on the floor. And the shrapnel would be coming in through the tent above the blast walls. We had all our IV bottles hanging from the ridge poles. And so the shrapnel would break the bottles and the IV fluids and the glasses all falling on the floor. And we'd have to crawl from patient to patient. You'd have to sweep the glass out of your way with your arm and crawl on to the next patient. And we'd sort of form a chain, and there would be a corpsman in the front, and he'd say, "Hey, doc, this guy's got a sucking chest wound," and he'd stick some Xeroform gauze or something over the wound, and then the doc coming up behind him would just take a scalpel and stick it in the chest between the 10th and 11th rib, the anterior axillary line, and you'd stick a finger in, push the lung out of the way, and slide a chest tube in, and the corpsman coming behind you would stitch it in and put a bandage around it. We'd put a Heimlich valve on it. This Heimlich valve was developed by the same guy that developed the Heimlich maneuver. And it was basically a big bronze cheer. And you plug it into the chest tube, and when a patient would breathe, they'd force out the air that had been trapped in the chest and go out through the chest tube. But this had a rubber flutter valve in it, and so they wouldn't suck more air back in. So it was a quick way to decompress the chest. And then one of the corpsmen would just tie a sterile glove on it, and it'd collect blood. And we actually medevac patients that would be hanging onto that tube to keep it from pulling out with one hand and holding their IV bottle with the other hand, or holding a bag of blood that they were getting, and they'd walk out to the chopper. And the old saying is, it is really, really hard to kill a 19-year-old Marine.
Hey, hoorah.
Anyway, that's most of my tale. And there's a lot more that I could go into, and some of it's printable and some of it isn't. But I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all might have. And these slides that are running, that's actually from Quezon loading some patients on the chopper. The Marines were still flying 34s when I got over there. And they moved up to the 46s, and then the Army had 47s, and the Marines and the Navy had the 53, and the Army had some 53s too, and some of the sky cranes, the Jolly Green Giants, and that sort of thing. And we've got one veteran here who was on the Jolly Green. Hold up your hand. He got to handle the cranes to pick people up. You went down a few times, didn't you?
Yeah.
Thought so. Anyway, I've got 500 and something slides on this loop it's on the DVD, and it's from all areas of Vietnam. This is Quezon. We had an open top holding bunker there. We finally got our medical facilities into 2 bunkers underground, and these were pretty good sized bunkers. They were about 20 feet long, 12 feet wide, and about 8 feet high, and buried underground and with sandbags. And you had to have 7 layers on a bunker roof, and that was mandatory because artillery, particularly the 152s from Korok, would punch through 5 layers. And I had a picture of one of my corpsmen sitting on the roof of a bunker with his feet down in those artillery around craters. And it went through 5 layers, but it didn't punch into the bunker. So you had a minimum of 7 layers, and that was runway matting and ammo boxes full of dirt and sandbags and more of the same, and shell casings and that sort of thing, shell casings from 106 recoilless and 105 artillery that we used just as layers on the bunkers. But they worked. You had good cover when we got underground. We had this open top bunker to load patients, and we took them from the underground bunkers over there when the choppers were coming in. This corpsman there is John Sikora, and he's got a red flag, and he would go out there and fly with the chopper in to show them where to land. And he should have gotten a medal. I don't know that he ever did, but he was exposed all the time, and we would occasionally take rounds in while the chopper was on the ground, and they'd take off at that point in time. That's the entrance to, I think, the triage bunker, and the entrance to the holding bunkers over on the right. Pretty well covered up. There was a picture up there a while ago showing one of these wooden bunkers that was actually above ground, and it showed those big wooden towers sticking up. Those are air vents, and when we had these underground, the vent was still sticking up so that we could get good air exchange down inside. Anyway, that's yes, ma'am.
How did you get light down into there to see what you were doing?
We had 12-volt generators from the CBs. There was a CB encampment straight across the road from our medical
Are
facility.
the CBs the engineers?
Yes, and they had generators, 12-volt generators, and so we actually had a line laying on top of the ground, run over to our emplacement, and all the bunkers had 12-volt.
So it was loud even when there weren't bombs dropping.
Well, you could hear the generators for sure. In fact, we loved hearing the generators. I mean, we were in trouble. Couldn't hear the generators. Well, that's, I think that actually, I don't know, I don't remember the window being in our bunker. I don't know whose that is. That's Ed Feldman standing in front of the entrance to that bunker. And the entrance would go back, and then the bunker's underground, back behind there.
Almost looks like a CP command post, almost.
Might have been.
What's a CP?
Command post, that's where a lot of the officers and everybody that's organizing the maneuver of the military.
That's looking between the entrances to 2 bunkers out onto the revetments over on the other side where the worked the choppers when they weren't flying or when they'd been blown away. But, any more questions?